Hello everyone and welcome back to my true crime channel. I hope you're all well. Today I want to talk about Gabby Petito's fiance, Brian Laundrie, and whether he could be a serial killer. Now the reason I want to discuss this today, guys, is two ladies, a couple that were staying very near to Gabby and Brian not long before Gabby disappeared and was later found dead, tragically. Two other women were murdered. They were shot dead. Not only that, a homeless man was found dead, and apparently Brian was seen not far from where this man was found. What I find really weird is wherever Brian Laundrie seems to go, dead people keep turning up. Now, apparently it has been confirmed that there is no known link by law enforcement between this couple's murders and the murder of Gabby. Personally, I don't believe it. Now, this young couple were murdered not long before Gabby. Their names were Kylan Schultz and Crystal Turner. I hope I've pronounced that right. Now, apparently, the Grand County, Utah Sheriff's Office announced that it's ruling out an earlier announced possibility that the disappearance and later murder of YouTuber Gabby Petito might be tied to the double homicide of the couple. Now, what's weird is Gabby and Brian were staying at the same La Salle Mountains campsite where recently married couple Crystal and Kylan had been murdered. According to Gabby's family, they spoke to her last at the end of August. Mid-August, Gabby and Brian were questioned by police over suspicion of domestic violence. Moab Police Department said that no charges were filed by either party. We're obviously all aware of all of the details now surrounding that, and surrounding a call from a member of the public to the police to report seeing the couple fighting. Reports were given to the police that Brian was seen to be slapping and hitting Gabby, which is absolutely horrific, and it must have been really horrible for these people to witness it, and even worse, a lot more horrible for Gabby to endure it. Now, Crystal and Kylan were camping near Moab in Utah. The pair were last seen on August the 13th at a bar named Woody's Tavern, and that's in Moab. A friend of the couple by the name of Cindy was worried about their whereabouts. She went to look for them, and tragically, she came across Kylan's body. Not long after, Crystal's body, tragically, was also found. According to Utah Sheriff's Office, the couple said that they'd reached out to friends to tell them about a very suspicious man who had been hanging around and acting really weirdly where they'd set up camp, and that they'd been considering moving their camp because of this man. Could that man be Brian Laundrie? Now, as far as I'm aware, there are no other persons of interest in this double murder. It's a very weird case. It's strange that no one's been done for it yet. Obviously, in a campsite, you would have thought other people would have seen or heard something. Perhaps not. I know in some campsites, people are quite spaced apart from one to another, whether in a tent, whether in a motorhome. So it's possible no one would have heard. I do find it weird that there were reports of a man hanging around acting strangely when, let's face it, Brian Laundrie acted very strangely in the police body cam footage, in my opinion. And as far as I'm concerned, going on the run is pretty strange too. There's been another witness report from a woman who saw Brian Laundrie acting very weird, parking and driving in a strange, erratic way. He was not with Gabby on this occasion. The woman spots the van, not necessarily with him in it, over a period of 3 different days. On one day, she does see Brian. On the other 2 days, she doesn't see anybody in the vehicle. But note that on all 3 days, she doesn't once see Gabby. And what's even weirder is the dead body of a homeless man was found, and apparently, at first, people thought it was Brian's dead body. It wasn't. People then speculated had Brian killed the man. There are rumours around that potentially the homeless man took his own life. If that's true, clearly Brian's not involved. But there are rumours circulating that Brian was seen not far away from where this man was found dead. On a certain day, Brian was seen near this place, apparently, outside a Walmart. Is it true? Could Brian have something to do with his death, or is it just a hoax? Now, going back to the couple that were murdered, one of them worked in a co-op, one of them worked in a McDonald's. Now, Brian and Gabby had visited this co-op, and apparently their argument had started in this co-op, so they continue arguing outside of the shop and carry on up the sidewalk, which is where the member of the public witnesses Brian slapping and hitting Gabby. Not long before that incident, they'd been in the shop. Now, could that have had any significance in this woman's murder? Had she met Brian before that incident? How long had Brian and Gabby been in that local area? Could Brian have met this couple? And has he got anything to do with their deaths? The reason I ask, because this place in Utah doesn't have a lot of suspicious deaths, doesn't have a lot of murders. So it seems really weird to me that quite a few people have turned up dead, murdered, when Brian has been in the local area. So as always, I want to know your thoughts and views, guys. Do you think Brian could be involved in this couple's tragic double murders? Do you think he's got anything to do with it? Pop them comments below and let me know what you think. Personally, I wouldn't be surprised if he is involved. I wonder if he got a taste for murder by murdering that couple and then went on to murder Gabby. Obviously, I could be wrong, but I do think Brian is involved in Gabby's death. It was ruled as a homicide by the coroner. We are now waiting for news as to her exact cause of death, which when we all find out is going to be truly heartbreaking. I think we can all be sure of that.
So we're all aware that the couple were pulled over on August the 12th by police in Moab in Utah following Brian driving erratically. Following on from that incident, Brian is sent to a motel and he's taken there by the police. Gabby is made to go off on her own in the van and spend the evening by herself. Now what's extremely interesting is the motel that Brian was sent to was called the Bowen Motel. And chillingly, that motel is extremely, and when I say extremely, I do mean extremely close to the place where one of the murdered couple worked at the Moonflower Community Cooperative. Now I'm shortly going to show you a series of screenshots from a map that show you just how close that hotel that Brian stayed in is to that community cooperative store. So the red circle highlights the Bowen Motel, which is where allegedly Brian spent the night. It would be really interesting to know from CCTV footage within that motel whether Brian stayed the night or whether he actually left. What's interesting is not just the proximity of this motel to this cooperative store. What's interesting is one of the arguments the couple were witnessed having took place in this store. One of the murdered couple worked in this store and their argument spilled out onto the sidewalk where the witness, Christopher, called in a police report of domestic violence or a domestic dispute between the couple. So the next image I'm about to share with you guys shows you just how close the co-op store and the motel Brian stayed in were. Look at that. I've got to say, as soon as I heard about this couple being murdered in such close proximity to where Brian had stayed with Gabby, the fact that they'd stayed at the same campsite, the fact the store is so very close to the motel that Brian stayed in, I've got to be honest, guys, I think that potentially Brian Laundrie is a serial killer. I wonder how many people before Gabby he'd murdered. Could this couple have been his first kill? Did he get a taste for it? And is that why he went on to murder Gabby? So now the next image, guys, is of the world famous Woody's Tavern. This is the very last place that the murdered couple were seen. The couple were last seen alive on August the 13th. Bear in mind that Brian, or Dirty Laundrie as we all call him now, stayed in that motel one night before this couple were last seen on August the 13th. A 4-day search was underway until tragically both of their bodies were found on August the 18th near their campsite in the La Salle Mountains. They were discovered, sadly, by one of their friends. It is believed they'd both been dead for at least 4 days. And could it be, and I'm starting to think it is, that Brian, the Dirty Laundrie, murdered them as well as Gabby? So on the last evening the couple are spotted, they were with friends in the world famous Woody's Tavern bar, and they told their friends there was a creepy guy at their campsite. They said that this guy creeped them out and they might have to move campsite because of the guy. They told friends they decided they were definitely going to be moving campsites on that day, but it would appear they never were able to move campsites because tragically they were murdered before they had the chance. So Kylan, who was also known as Kylan or Kai Schult, who was 24, and Crystal Michelle Turner, who was 38, were a married couple that had been living in around the local area of Moab. As I said, they both had jobs in the local area and they were both staying on a campsite near the South Mesa area of the Lal Sal Loop Road in the Grand County. Now, it was Kylan that worked at the Moonflower Community Cooperative store. Could she have been in there working when the couple had the row? The row that then erupted into the street, up the sidewalk, as I said before, where the witness, Christopher, witnesses the domestic dispute going on. Could it be that Kylan was working at the store that day? And did she witness what went on? Did Brian then think that potentially Kylan could have been responsible for reporting the couple to the police? Did he then think he had to take revenge? And is that why the couple were tragically murdered? Now, as you can see from the photos, guys, it looks like a very small store. It doesn't look like a massive store. I wouldn't imagine people having domestic disputes inside the store was something that went on a daily basis. So, as we know, at least 2 people reported them to the police, but who the other witness was other than this Christopher, I don't know. Could it have been Kylan? And even if it was, she certainly didn't deserve to die alongside Crystal. Now, the next screenshot that I'm going to show you guys is of a map. The circle on the right is where the bodies were found. The circle on the left is where Moab is. Depending on the time of day and traffic, it's about a 45-minute to 1-hour drive from Moab to this campsite. This really does make me wonder, is this Brian that's involved in these murders? And not only that, the couple, Brian and Gabby, had been known to be staying in that local area, as well as the murdered couple, Crystal and Kylan. I do really think that this is too much of a coincidence that Gabby turned up dead, and not long before she's found, Crystal and Kylan were tragically found dead. I do think Brian's involved. The sooner they catch that dirty laundry, the better. This really has now got me wondering, guys, is Brian, the dirty laundry, a serial killer? Had he killed before Gabby? Obviously we don't know that he killed Gabby, but I think it's pretty certain that he did, in my opinion. I think he killed this couple as well. There was a homeless man that turned up dead outside a Walmart in Alabama on a road or a place called Tillman's Corner. The homeless man was very sadly found dead on Monday the 16th of September. Apparently Brian had also been seen in the area where the homeless man was found dead. At first, people thought the homeless man was Brian and that Brian was the dead body, or that the dead body was Brian's. Obviously it wasn't. This could be some sort of hoax, so I can't be certain. But if he was near a homeless man that turned up dead, a couple that turned up dead, and not only that, his fiancee turned up dead, this is too strange for me. This cannot be a coincidence. There are too many red flags for this man. The local area in Utah where this took place doesn't have murders on a regular basis. In fact, it's extremely rare for a murder to take place there, which makes me think, and I wonder what you think, guys, that Brian, the dirty laundry, is potentially a serial killer. So there are a few other things that I want to point out that lead me to believe that Brian, the dirty laundry, or Brian Dirty Laundry, is a serial killer. So not only do we know that he flew home to go back to see his dad to clear out a storage unit that him and Gabby had been using. From what I can gather, Brian flies home back to Florida on the 17th of August and he returns to meet up with Gabby again on the 23rd of August. This poor couple that were murdered and that were found dead, Crystal and Kylan, were found, or their bodies were found, on the 18th of August. So isn't it interesting that not long before they're found, this man flees, the dirty laundry flees. I found it weird even before I'd learnt about this couple's tragic deaths, that Brian went home to deal with the storage unit. If you're travelling on a holiday of a lifetime, or you've started a new van life, why did you need to rush home to deal with a storage unit? Could it be that Brian was fleeing because of the murders that he'd committed? Something else I want to point out is Brian was often changing his look. Sometimes he had a beard, sometimes he didn't. Could it be that he wasn't just experimenting with how he looked as a young man and trying to find his way in life and how he wanted to look? Could it be that he kept changing his appearance because he was doing things that were very weird and very wrong? Was he up to no good? Was he committing murders? And was he constantly changing his appearance so that he wouldn't get caught? So on the last night that Crystal and Kylan were seen, they told more than one of their friends at Woody's bar about this weird guy, this creepy guy, on their campsite, how they were definitely going to move later that night or the next day, and they said, which is really chilling, that if they turn up dead, they've both been murdered. I really do think that Brian could be responsible for their deaths. I hope the police aren't ruling it out. I really do. I wonder if they're keeping very tight-lipped because they don't want to worry and panic the general public, and not only that, they don't want the tourists or the tourist trade to be affected in the Utah area by people thinking that there's a serial killer on the loose. So there are a couple of other things that I want to go through. Brian was known for being a good artist. He enjoyed drawing and he put a lot of his artwork on Instagram and on Pinterest and some other sites on the internet. But what's really interesting about Brian's love for art and being an artistic person is he seemed to enjoy drawing extremely dark things. Things like the devil, signs of death, a picture of a man holding a knife where he's covered in blood, really dark and ghoulish things. Now that doesn't mean he's a serial killer, but as I'm showing you here, some of his pictures are pretty dark. He clearly liked Fight Club with Brad Pitt, which is an excellent film, but a very dark film, very disturbing film, an excellent film. But I do wonder if Brian's tastes in art, films and books, especially books, which is what I'm about to talk about next, were a bit too dark for most people's liking. So Brian wasn't just into all things dark regarding art, he was also into literature that was quite dark. It is known that he has been reading some pretty dark books, one of which was called The Invisible Man, which is about a stalker who fakes a suicide and then tortures his girlfriend. There was another book that he was reading that was called Lullaby. This book is about a serial killer who goes on a road trip and on a murder spree after his wife and his child dies. So I find it highly interesting that this is the sort of literature Brian, the Dirty Laundrie, enjoyed reading. I shouldn't find it weird really, because he does seem quite a weird character. But when you add up all these things that I've said, his love for all things dark, whether it be art, whether it be literature, the fact that so many dead people keep turning up around him, I'm seriously convinced that Brian is a serial killer.
I really do feel extremely sad about what happened to Gabby. She was a young woman with her whole life ahead of her that shouldn't have had her life snuffed out by Brian, Dirty Laundrie. The way his family have covered up his crime, let him run off, let him go into hiding is a disgrace. I hope that if the parents are involved in some kind of cover-up and they knew that Gabby was dead or that something awful had happened and they didn't tell the police, I hope they're going to be arrested. I hope they lock up the whole Dirty Laundrie family and get that key and throw it away. As I said, guys, please share your thoughts with me. Keep popping them comments below. Tell me what you think. Have you heard about this double murder? Do you think that this couple were murdered by Brian? Or do you just think it's a coincidence that they were murdered so near to where Gabby and Brian had been staying, and that not long after their double murders, Gabby is murdered too? Well, anyway, guys, I hope you're well. I hope you're having a great day. And as always, I am going to be back with you very soon for another true crime video. Bye for now.